We've learned from UNL research that agricultural real estate values jumped 31% in the last year. This is the largest increase in the 34-year history of UNL's Nebraska Farm Real Estate Survey. As we look forward at potential concerns on that expensive land, moisture comes to the front. We've covered soil moisture issues in the past, and this week we talked with UNL Extension forage specialist Bruce Anderson about how chances for a drought this year could affect pastures and rangeland in Nebraska.
A drought is always possible, but if we take a look at what happened in the southern regions the past year or two, we see that a lot of times it creeps up on us when we least expect it. And we certainly are on the fringe of the area where the drought was pretty severe this past year. And if it creeps much further than where it did last year, we could be right in the midst of it.
Let's talk about right now, conditions right now. What are the ranges, what are the pastures like?
Well, I think we see that at least on the surface, things look pretty good. We've had moisture over the winter, and the surface moisture is looking fairly decent in many areas. But there's a lot of regions where when you start getting down to the subsoil, start getting down 2 feet, 3 feet deep, we start getting quite a bit drier, and we haven't had a full recharge of the soil's water holding capacity. So we're sitting at kind of a balancing point here, where if we don't have abundant or at least the normal spring rains, we're going to be going into the heat of summer with possibly a little less rain and a little less moisture than what we normally would have.
Now, how much is the variation across the state? Is it vast?
It's not a real huge variation. We've certainly been fortunate over the last year or two in the western part of the state of having quite a bit more rain in most areas than what we normally do. The eastern part has had some areas where we've been just on the edge. In fact, before this snow back in February, we were kind of sitting on a point where we were abnormally dry, but that snow brought us back up to a moisture level where it was okay. But we're still not going to be very far away from a point where a drought could begin very quickly for us.
So let's play out that scenario then. If there is a drought, what do you advise producers to do then and probably now leading up to?
That's right, and I think that key you said there is that now part there, because really if we start making our plans after we're in the middle of a drought, which we never know when we are in the middle of that drought until it's too late, it will be just that. It'll be too late to really do many of the things that we want to do. So we've got to be identifying ahead of time, and always should have planned ahead of time what our drought actions might be in terms of how we handle the livestock, how we handle the forage resources that we have, how we manage those resources.
So let's say if pastures dry out, what are some of the other options that producers can look at?
Well, there's a number of things we can do from a pasture standpoint or a forage standpoint. One could simply be that in the springtime, early summer, reserve some lands that we might even plant to more drought-hardy crops, like some of the summer annual grasses, like sorghum sudan grass or the millets, so that we have that available for us to use as a forage resource if we need, and can use it for grazing or cutting for hay. Other things that we can do is make sure that right from the very start we're in a good grazing management program, one where we're using rotational grazing, adequate rest and grazing periods so that the grass will be healthy. We'll have a deep rooting situation that will be able to use all the moisture we may potentially have there. And also in particular, where many producers may break their herd up into several small groups for breeding purposes or other reasons in the spring, getting them all back together into one large herd and having higher stock density and more portions of the pasture resting and recovering after every grazing event will help grow more forage and help extend our grazing capabilities through the year.
Because of, in part, the drought down south, a lot of the forages have moved down south and some cattle have moved up north. So when people start thinking about how expensive it's going to be to feed not only this spring but into the summer, what are some things to keep in mind there, some pointers for cattle producers out there?
Well, I think we always have to look at the economics of various scenarios that we have there. We know that we're certainly starting out the season with forage prices, hay prices, and other forage resources quite high. And while we do have also pretty good cattle prices there, we can still get quickly overwhelmed if we don't have the forage resources that need to support the animals we have. So simply having the right animal numbers that our forage can support is probably one of the most important things for us to be doing, and not be overstocked and end up with suddenly pressure to have to go out and buy something that's extremely expensive.